Hey everybody, today we are in Isaiah chapters 46 to 48. And this is a really monumental section in the book of Isaiah, mainly because it's addressing people who are either still in exile or are in exile in their minds, that they've maybe been released from exile, but they're still clinging to the old ways. And we know that this section, by reading it, is about God's sort of judgment or tearing down of all the things that prop up the Babylonians who had taken God's people into exile. So chapter 46 is about tearing down their theology of their gods being better than Yahweh. In chapter 47, it's all about tearing down their politics and where they find their strength. And chapter 48 is a call for the people of Israel to turn to God and remember all the things that He has done for them. So why does God need to do this, and why is this so important? Well, in that culture, in that day and age, people believed that your God or the gods were regional, meaning that they had sort of oversight of a people in a particular place, a geographical place, which is why Jonah thought he could get away from God by getting on a boat and sailing across the sea to another country, because it's as if he thought that he could leave God's, Yahweh's jurisdiction, so to speak, that God would have no call or influence over him, which is why Jonah does what he does. And so people believe that the God or gods that we worship, they're sort of localized in this one area, and when war would happen, it meant that that nation's gods would invade your God's space, and your God and their gods would go to battle against each other. And whoever won the war, it was said, well, that God was not as strong and the other gods won. Those gods defeated your God and slew your God, just like our people slew your people. And now our God is moving, expanding his territory. He's defeated your God, and now he's taken over his territory and his people. And this is how people thought of the gods. And so for the Jewish people, when they were defeated by first the Assyrians and then the Babylonians, they thought, well, the Babylonian gods have defeated our God, Yahweh. They've won. And those who were left were taken back to Babylon into exile, and they were taught and forced to learn all about the Babylonian theology, about Babylonian gods and goddesses and who did what and who was important. This culture, this viewpoint was sort of enmeshed in their brains, because how else would they think, right? Your gods clearly defeated our God, and so your gods are the ones that we should sort of worship and follow after, right? And so now, here, the people are either about to leave exile or they already have, and yet they find themselves still enmeshed in believing that the old gods have won, that the Babylonian gods were prevailing. It's been sort of enculturated into them. And this begs the question, why would people do something like that? Well, it's because we do the same thing. I talked about in a previous video how we don't have in the Western world sort of graven images of the gods that we worship, right? It's not like we have a shrine in our house that we bow down to, most of us, hopefully. But we worship gods that are invisible. They're still gods. They're still gods. We just don't have a shrine of them in our house, but our house is kind of the shrine for some of us, right? That we worship the God of new construction. We worship the God of progress. We worship the God of wealth and prosperity. We worship the God of sex or power. And so, we don't have a shrine of those things, maybe. We don't walk around with a rosary or, a necklace that has an image of that God on it. But we still follow after these things. And like the people back then, when we think that God has been successful in some area of our life, that maybe even like we're a Christian person, and we get allured by the god of money, right? And all of a sudden we come into a lot of money, or we earn a lot of money, and we see, wow, this money has done a lot for me. Look at all the stuff that I've been able to buy. Look at my new fancy clothes. Look at my car. How good is it? I feel good. So that God is obviously better than mine. And so we attach our allegiance to this God, right? This new God that we think has sort of conquered the old one. And we do this in our minds, right? Money seems to be working out for me, so I'm going to keep following money. I'm going to think less about this old God that I used to worship. But here in this section, God is tearing that to pieces bit by bit. He says this in the beginning of chapter 46, where he basically likens these Babylonian gods, these false gods, to like floats in a parade. He says that these gods of Babylon are like images that they have to be carried onto animals. Like they're made, right? They have to be constructed and made. They're carried on by animals, and they're marched down the street together, but they have no power. They can't save. They can't move. They can't do anything apart from people doing that for them. But this gets contrasted in verse 3 of chapter 46, where God says, look at the kind of God that I am, though. I've borne you from birth. I carried you in the womb. Even when I turn old and gray, when you turn old and gray, I will carry you, God says. I made you and I will bear you. I will carry you and save you. So unlike the Babylonian gods who have to be, they themselves are made and carried and powerless, God says, I'm the God who I make, I carry, and I give power to my people. I'm the one who enacts these things. So who is the one with the real power and might? And the whole purpose of this is to help extract those people who have encultured themselves to something that they thought was more appealing, or that won, but in reality is still hollow and cannot save. It's empty, it's vain. And I guess the question for us as we read through this is, what sort of gods have we attached ourselves to? What sort of things do we follow after that seem like they're alluring? They seem like maybe they've even moved into God's territory because he hasn't done very much for us. And so we think that they're real or they're better, but actually when you pick them apart, like God does in these chapters, you find that there's nothing there. They just have to be made, carried like a parade, a float in a parade that has no power on its own, and it's lifeless. It cannot save. So this begs the question of, for us to have a hard look at ourselves and think, what are those sorts of things that we are carrying around on parade and holding up and saying, this is the thing that we worship and follow after, when really it's lifeless? So maybe you want to stop and think and pray, examine yourself, and ask God, show me, are there things that I'm worshiping and following that they're not actually alive, they can't actually transform me, and they don't bring me the joy and purpose that I'm looking for? So it's a good challenge. That's it. I'll leave that with you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.